My Earth friends, this is Rakak speaking. I am honored that I am once again able to share a message with the people of Earth. As has often been stated, us galactics are not the saviors of mankind. We're the support. You Lightworkers are the saviors. You are the ones you have been waiting for. However, understandably, this perspective annoys or even angers many Lightworkers. After all, gray hats, which we think is the more appropriate term for white hats, and us galactics live more comfortable lives. Both gray hats and us galactics also have more weapons and technology and soldiers than Lightworkers do. So there is a very understandable and common sentiment among Lightworkers that either galactics or gray hats should be doing more than they are doing. We acknowledge that this situation is unfair and, in a way, unreasonable. Yes, this has been dragging on for too long. If you had asked us 20 years ago what we thought was going to happen, then we would have predicted that certainly somewhere before say 2018, the military and police forces of Earth would have arrested the Dark Controllers and would have started broadcasting truth on your mainstream networks. From our point of view, the gray hats haven't been as brave as they should. And therefore things haven't moved as quickly as they should. Gray hats are those people who have some amount of power and who aren't moral enough to be white hats, but they are partially resisting the Dark Controllers. This includes certain police officers and soldiers and politicians. It includes Q and Trump and Putin and other nationalistic leaders. In the earlier message, Hawken, people treat animals as elites treat people, Hawken shared the following rule of thumb: if the media tells you that someone is great, then that person is probably a black hat. If the media tells you that someone is awful, then that person is probably a gray hat. There are very few white hats in positions of power, unfortunately, because moral people often don't seek out power and they also don't play the kind of power games that are needed to become powerful. They also tend to get their planes shot down, they get assassinated, character assassinated, they have false evidence planted on them, courts are weaponized against them, they're told that their loved ones will be murdered if they keep going. Black hat agents try to get them drunk or drugged so that they can then be filmed in compromising situations. Beautiful women hired by the black hats seek to seduce married white hats so that the black hats can blackmail them. Black hats try to get them to ingest mind-altering or brain-damaging substances, etc. Black hats fear and therefore really despise white hats. And black hats don't play fair. Frankly, the average gray hat has more experience with dirty power games and is therefore a bit more equipped to handle the Dark Controllers coming after them. There are few white hats in positions of power, and they aren't an organized group. However, gray hats do exist as an organized group and have been working with some effectiveness against the Dark Controllers. Your lives would be much worse than if they weren't there. At the same time, it is hard for a number of us galactics to understand why police forces and intelligence officers and soldiers haven't been doing more to fight the Dark Controllers. In some countries, they have literally sworn to protect the Constitution or protect the people, and yet in practice they often just follow orders, which sometimes clearly go against the Constitution or the people. Even though it's a well-known concept on your world that soldiers shouldn't follow moral orders, and that, I was just following orders, is not a valid defense. To be fair, some soldiers are already doing behind-the-scenes arrests of certain Dark Controllers, albeit in a covert and very slow way. More is happening on that front than it may seem, and there absolutely is a faction in many militaries that is actively working for the good of the people. Just like us, they have also successfully prevented a number of disasters. Still, they haven't done their public mass arrests or their takeover of mainstream media yet, unfortunately. This probably will come at some point in the future. Why aren't the gray hats doing the public mass arrests yet? Well, part of it is that the higher-up gray hats simply think that they're better and more valuable and more deserving than average people, and hence they feel they deserve more money and fame and knowledge and power and control than the ordinary person. And the higher-up gray hats understand, in the back of their minds, that if they create a love-based society that they will no longer have more money and fame and knowledge and power and control than the ordinary person. To illustrate this, Gray Hat Trump is a billionaire. If he donated part of his fortune and his assets to charity, then he could prevent a good number of people from starving or freezing to death. What kind of person inherits many millions of dollars and proceeds to sit on a metaphorical pile of gold, while his metaphorical brothers and sisters are starving or freezing to death? A person who believes he's better than other people, that's who. Yes, we understand that a lot of Trump's net worth is in assets and not in liquid money in the bank. And yes, once you start dividing money among many people, it tends to get used up more quickly than you would think. Still, it is obvious that Trump could use part of his fortune to save and improve a good number of lives. If you don't believe that handing out money solves problems or that poor people just made bad choices, well, sometimes that's true. But if Trump was concerned with that, he could seek out cases where hardworking people were ruined by a medical expense, or he could spend some money to create more opportunities for well-meaning people, or something like that. Can you imagine Jesus having $1 billion and proceeding to just sit on that while his brothers and sisters starve and freeze to death? Even just the idea of an actual white hat doing that is absurd. Now, I'm not saying that people must donate all their possessions. It's fine to have enough for yourself that you can have a comfortable life. But being a billionaire is excessive, from my point of view. To be clear, Trump has been a huge net positive in the world. He has done a lot to fight the black hats and has done a lot to wake people up. He has at times made significant sacrifices and performed significant acts of service for mankind. Other recent US presidents have been actual black hats and have been far worse than Trump. So I'm not saying that you should despise Trump. If he had never been born, your lives would be substantially worse today. To give just one example of that, it's entirely possible that without Trump, Hillary would have become president and would have started a hot war between NATO versus Russia plus China. Such a war would likely become slow and grinding. It's entirely possible that you, the person receiving this message, would be in a trench in Eastern Europe right now if Trump hadn't become president. And if you think they wouldn't draft me, don't be too quick to say that. Dark Forces has been drafting 60-year-olds. In case of a serious war, the West may draft women. If you think it's a good thing that you are not in a trench in Eastern Europe right now, being shelled by Russian artillery and under attack from Chinese drones, then I hope you understand that Trump genuinely has done good things for the world. I am just attacking Trump's magpie-like tendencies to illustrate that gray hats have the unfortunate tendency to be a bit narcissistic and to think that they deserve more money and fame and power than the average person. Which hinders them in their attempts to create a love-based world, because then they wouldn't be billionaires in a world where other people are homeless. To a light worker that sounds insane, but to the narcissistic part of the minds of the richer gray hats, it sounds good and proper that they are a billionaire while other people are starving or homeless. Because they are just better, after all. Never mind that some of them inherited millions of dollars. Another thing that hinders the higher-up white hats is that some of them simply lack the courage to do what obviously needs to be done, i.e. publicly arrest the black hats and take over the mainstream media. Gray hats love to tell themselves and others that they simply have to go fight the dark controllers in this covert and very slow way, but that's simply a lie. I have to act in this way is the lie that people always tell themselves when they fail to live up to their conscience. I really hate the "I have to act in this way" line, because I have used it in the past myself when I wanted to justify immoral actions. People always have a choice. There are always multiple paths. The plain truth is what everyone already knows: this covert and very slow path that the gray hats are taking is not in fact optimal. It would have been better if mass arrests had happened years ago. So much suffering and so many deaths would have been prevented. Alright, so us galactics agree with you that the gray hats should be doing more. But it's always easy to say that other people should do more. why aren't we galactics taking more action ourselves? Well, we galactics are supporting you energetically. We are helping to raise the energy on your world. We're doing a lot of subtle work, such as purifying your water and air. We have dealt with most malevolent galactics already and are cleaning up the relatively few who remain. We are preventing certain disasters from occurring, and we are doing important special operations behind the scenes. Some galactics have died during these missions. Now, obviously you are suffering more than we are. I am just saying that to illustrate that we are serious about helping you. Millions of galactics are away from home right now in order to help you. We are willing to take casualties to help you. A not insignificant number of galactics are volunteering to do dangerous missions to help our Earth brothers and sisters, even though those same galactics could also just choose not to volunteer and to have a centuries or millennia-long life in what you would think of as something close to paradise. Also, us galactics too are eagerly looking forward to meeting you, physically, in the flesh. However, at this specific moment in time we don't think it's a good idea for us to do more than what we're currently doing, although that may change in the future. One issue is that if we land openly and we say that we come in peace, then the Dark Controllers would order your militaries to start shooting us. Plenty of soldiers would follow orders. And if we defend ourselves, or if we do a mass arrest of Dark Controllers, or if we remain in orbit and take over your media from up here, then Dark Controllers would spin that as Earth getting invaded by hostile aliens. From a consciousness standpoint, it wouldn't benefit you to seemingly get invaded by hostile aliens. Us seemingly invading you would also delay the point when we can openly walk among you in peace. Then there's an issue that us landing in peace wouldn't at this point violate your free will, but us taking over your mainstream media or doing mass arrests on your world would violate your free will. If you polled Earth humans today, most of them wouldn't vote for aliens doing these things. Then there's the issue that if we just hand you an advanced civilization, it may very well not last, and in a couple of centuries we might be right back to the current situation. We handed you an advanced civilization in Atlantis, and it didn't last, and we learned from Atlantis that it simply doesn't work for a more advanced race to just push a less advanced race into a so-called more advanced way of living. This may seem heartless, but we genuinely do think that it's preferable to Earth humans to be in a tough or even awful situation until 2024 or 2025 or 2026, rather than risk another Atlantis-style collapse and the darkness that would follow. While of course the situations aren't exactly the same, you also know from experience that if America invades a Middle Eastern country to spread democracy, then often they do more harm than good. Now sure, the US is a bit schizophrenic, in that on one hand it genuinely wants to spread democracy, but on the other hand it also seeks to ruthlessly achieve geopolitical aims and get control over resources. We're not seeking to exploit your natural resources. Still, this illustrates that it doesn't really work when a more developed society uses force to subdue a less developed society and then tries to get them to adopt a new way of life. And yes, at this specific moment in time we can't just land peacefully and openly, because we'd get shot at. We don't have an endless capacity to just sit there and absorb fire. To peacefully land, we need one of two things. Either we need the consciousness of Earth to be higher, so that soldiers won't shoot at us even when ordered. Or we need Earth's military and police and intelligence forces to finally do mass arrests, so that there are no Dark Controllers who would order soldiers to shoot at us. When the consciousness of Earth is high enough, your military and police and intelligence forces will do mass arrests. So you Lightworkers do hold the key to Earth's liberation, to mass arrests, and to us landing. The key is simply this: raise your own consciousness high enough, and in doing so you automatically uplift all of humanity. Do that sufficiently and you will have mass arrests of Dark Controllers and a peaceful landing of us galactics. One day you will be free, it's just a question of how long it's going to take for that future to materialize. This is also the strategy we're currently aiming for. A lot of galactics from a lot of galactic races are working to send high and loving energy to Earth. Combined with your efforts to raise your consciousness and the consciousness of the people around you, together we will uplift humanity. In fact, we already are uplifting humanity. It may not seem like it, but the consciousness of Earth humans is significantly higher now than it was even a few years ago. I know the situation on Earth doesn't seem better, but in part that's because the higher proportion of light means that the darkness becomes all the more visible. And in part it's because the dark controllers know that they are losing and thus they're becoming even more heavy-handed and authoritarian. While the following of course isn't the whole reason, I think part of the reason why some lightworkers are frustrated is that they feel they are powerless and it is unfair that they have to fight from such a helpless position against the much more powerful system of the dark controllers. There are two misconceptions here. First of all, from our point of view, it's mostly the job of your military and police and intelligence agencies to directly fight the system of the dark controllers. It's mostly the job of lightworkers to raise the consciousness of humanity and to be a beacon of light, although of course you are encouraged to follow your own guidance. Raise your consciousness, and you uplift all of humanity, and then at some point your militaries and police and intelligence agencies will start doing what they should do. Second of all, you are actually much more powerful than the dark controllers are. True, they have more money and they have lots of underlings and institutions that they can give orders to. However, the dark controllers aren't capable of dragging down the consciousness of humanity, despite them trying really hard to do so. Meanwhile, you lightworkers are actually successfully uplifting the consciousness of humanity. So which side, exactly, is the powerless side? The dark controllers are able to win some battles, but every day they are closer to losing the war, and they know this and yet can't do anything about this. In a way, you already know this. The dark controllers wouldn't be acting so crazily and in such an obviously corrupt way if they were genuinely in control. If they were genuinely in control, they'd act in a much slower and more subtle way, so that the illusion would be maintained that the media and the government are working in the interest of the people. By now many people in the West realize that the media and the mainstream political parties are actively working against the people. This is actually a huge deal. 50 years ago the dark controllers weren't panicking, and they were maintaining their illusion of fairness much better, and the vast majority of people thought that the media spoke the truth and that politicians served the people. Today many people no longer believe that. This is a huge change in consciousness and perception in a relatively short period of time. I understand that you would prefer your freedom today, and you do deserve your freedom. However, the consciousness of humanity is already being transformed at a breakneck and dizzying pace. Certain other galactic races have taken a century or even a millennium to achieve the consciousness transformation that humanity is going through in 1 year. Uplifting the entire consciousness of humanity is a process that simply takes some time. As Hakan has stated before, I expect that your living conditions will likely be much improved before the end of 2026, perhaps even well before then. Galactic contact may occur before that time too. I understand that some amount of people will be dead by then, and I am sorry. I don't know what else to say about that. From my perspective, here are the two most important points from today's message. First of all, once lightworkers sufficiently uplift the consciousness of humanity, you will have your mass arrests and a peaceful open landing of galactics. You too can contribute to this, either through growing spiritually, or through healing, or through psychological work, or by being an example for others, or by shining your light, or through practical actions, or in whatever way you feel called. 2. You are not powerless. Earth's lightworkers are actually probably the most powerful faction of Earth humans, because they are the only ones who are incrementally moving towards their goal. Think about it. Earth's lightworkers may seemingly not be winning battles, but they sure are winning the war, because consciousness of Earth humans keeps incrementally rising. Hence mass arrests and open galactic contact are coming ever closer. Meanwhile, are the dark controllers powerful? Well, they are winning some battles, but there is nothing they can do to win the war. And they know they are losing the war, and yet they still have no options with which they can maintain their positions in the medium term. Every day they get more exposed and they lose more power, and they are one day closer to being mass arrested. How can a faction be powerful when it is losing the war for their very existence, and they can't do anything to change that? Then let's look at the average citizen. Are they powerful? Obviously not. They are brainwashed and just do as they are told. Are the gray hats powerful? I guess it depends on your definition of the word powerful. I say that the gray hats are not powerful at this moment, because they lack the will and the courage to act. A strong hand, without sufficient will behind it, is not powerful. It's just wasted potential. And whose will is stronger than that of the dedicated light worker? You are the only ones really doing what you should be doing, and you are doing it effectively and selflessly. You're not receiving money or power or control or fame from doing so, and yet you do it anyway, and you are winning. You may be losing some battles, you may be taking some casualties, but you are absolutely winning the war. Is this war pleasant? No, war is nasty and awful. But you are winning this consciousness war all the same, and that will eventually lead to an end of all wars on Earth. You Lightworkers are the only ones really winning, and despite the black hats trying anything they can to oppose you, you are still winning. Lightworkers are arguably the most powerful faction of Earth humans right now. Moreover, a new love-based society will be built. That is inevitable. And in that society, you Lightworkers will be the consciousness leaders. Dark controllers will have absolutely no power, and the higher-up gray hats will no longer have huge amounts of wealth and power more than average people do. Which is part of the reason why they're dragging their feet. But the point is, we are moving towards a future where you Lightworkers will be the consciousness leaders, and both gray hats and black hats will lose from their perspective. So you are moving towards a future that is very good for you, while the gray hats and black hats are moving towards a future where they lose from their perspective. So again, who is powerless? Who is winning? Who is losing? Now, I know that this message doesn't change the fact that some of you are in very difficult or painful situations right now. Some of you are suffering every day. You may be lonely. You may have lost loved ones. You may be in a lot of pain or trouble from medical conditions or poverty that either the gray hats or us galactics could solve easily. I do think it's critical that you are aware that Lightworkers are not powerless. You have the ability to change the situation on Earth. But yes, at the same time, it is very hard and unfair right now. I know. I'm sorry. With that, I leave you today, with all my love and my respect for your steadfastness. Your star brother.